right. So are you ready to dive into some seriously thought-provoking stuff today? We're going to tackle a question that's been on a lot of people's minds lately.
Oh, yeah.
It is, can billionaires be real-life superheroes?
You mean like the ones we see in comics and movies?
Exactly. Like, could someone with that much money actually make a difference in the world? Like on a global scale.
Okay, I see where you're going with this.
And to help us explore this, we're taking a deep dive into this super interesting article.
Oh, yeah, what's it called?
It's called How Elon Musk Can Inspire Other Billionaires to Become Modern-Day Superheroes.
Interesting title.
Right. And it's by Kelroy James, published in Data Driven Investor.
Okay, I've heard of them. They do some pretty in-depth analysis, don't they?
Yeah, they really dig into the data. This article looks
Hmm.
at like billionaire demographics, how their wealth is spread around the world, what industries they're in.
So it's not just like opinions and theories. They're actually using hard data to back up their points.
Exactly. And they kick things off with a story that I think really captures people's attention. Remember a while back when Elon Musk offered the UN $6 billion to fight world hunger?
Oh, yeah, that was all over the news.
Well, the article points out that that $6 billion was only 2% of Musk's total wealth.
Whoa, 2%. That's like pocket change for him. That's
Yeah.
insane.
Right. It really makes you think about the scale of wealth we're talking about here.
It's mind-boggling, really.
And speaking of billionaires, there seem to be more and more of them popping up every year. The article says that in 2021, there were 2,755 billionaires globally.
Wow, that's a lot of billionaires.
It is. And that's a huge jump from the year before, like 660 more billionaires in just 1 year.
That's a crazy increase. What's driving that kind of growth?
Well, the article points to things like globalization and international trade as major factors.
Globalization, huh? So the world's basically become one giant marketplace, right?
Yeah.
More interconnected, more opportunities to do business across borders.
Okay. Yeah, exactly. But it also maybe creates more competition and, potentially more inequality too.
Yeah, that's the downside, isn't it? It's not all sunshine and rainbows. Some people benefit more than others.
Definitely a complex issue.
Yeah.
And the article highlights that a lot of these new billionaires are concentrated in specific regions.
Like where?
The U.S. and China, primarily. We're kind of like the powerhouses of the billionaire world right now.
That makes sense given their economies and all the innovation happening there.
And now here's something I found really surprising. The article says that the industry with the most billionaires isn't actually technology, it's real estate.
Really? I would have thought it was tech. With all the big names like, Musk and Bezos and Zuckerberg.
Right. But it turns out that real estate is where it's at if you want to join the billionaire club.
Huh. Well, I guess everyone needs a place to live, right? No matter how much technology advances, we still need shelter.
True. And owning property is a pretty solid way to build wealth, I guess.
Yeah.
Maybe there's some secret real estate tips we could learn from these billionaire moguls.
Maybe. But let's not forget there's another important aspect the article brings up. The huge gender gap among billionaires.
Oh, yeah. That's a big one. I've heard about that.
It's pretty stark. For every 9 male billionaires, there's only 1 female billionaire.
That's a pretty big difference. Is that gap closing at all?
Well, the article does point to some rising stars like Rihanna and Kylie Jenner. They've built empires in, like, beauty and fashion, showing that women can definitely make it big.
Yeah, so it's not just about traditional philanthropy or, the tech world. There are other paths to becoming a billionaire.
Exactly. It's about shaking up industries and making your mark. So it seems like things are slowly shifting, but there's still a long way to go.
Definitely. Now, let's circle back to that core question. Can billionaires actually be superheroes? I mean, we've talked about the mind-blowing amounts of money they have, but does that automatically make them a force for good?
Good point. Just having wealth doesn't necessarily make you a hero. There's got to be more to it than that.
Right. So this article highlights a pretty eye-opening statistic. It says that the richest 10% of people on Earth own a massive 76% of all the wealth.
76%. Wow, that's a huge chunk.
It is. Meanwhile, the poorest, 50%, own just 2%.
That's a massive disparity. It's like some people have superpower level wealth while others are barely scraping by.
And it kind of makes you wonder, does this huge gap make it harder for billionaires to actually make a difference? Like, are they even playing on the same field as the rest of us?
It's a valid question. The article even suggests there might be a link between this wealth concentration and, remember, globalization.
Ah, so we're back to that two-sided coin. Globalization creates opportunities, but also potentially widens the gap between the haves and the have-nots.
Exactly. So Are these billionaires using their wealth to tackle these complex problems that globalization might be creating? Or are they part of the problem? That's the million-dollar question, right?
Right. And it's not like there's an easy answer. The article doesn't pretend to have all the solutions.
But it does give us a lot to think about.
Absolutely. And it kind of sets the stage for our deep dive today. Are billionaires using their wealth like Iron Man, fighting for good? Or are they more like, well, Lex Luthor, focused on personal gain?
Ooh, I like that analogy. Iron Man versus Lex Luthor. That's a great way to frame it.
Right. So we've got this explosion of billionaires. Real estate is surprisingly powerful, and there's this serious gender gap we need to address. What else does this article reveal about the world of billionaire superheroes? I guess we're about to find out.
You know, one thing that really stood out to me in this article,
Oh, yeah. What's that?
it's how they define wealth.
Okay. How do they define it?
Well, it's not just about, like, the money you have in your bank account.
Oh, so there's more to it than that.
Yeah, exactly. They take a
Yeah.
much broader view. It's about all of your valuable possessions, your investments, even your house.
So, like, if you own a fancy car or have a big art collection, that all counts towards your wealth.
Exactly. It's all part of the picture. And this broader definition really helps us understand that gap between the super rich and everyone else.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Because it's not just about income, it's about the total value of everything you own, right?
Right. And speaking of that gap, the article mentions that since 1995, the billionaire's share of global wealth has tripled.
Tripled. That's a huge increase.
It is. It went from 1% to 3%.
Wow. So in less than 30 years, billionaires went from controlling a small sliver of global wealth to having a much bigger piece of the pie.
Exactly. And it makes you think, is that level of wealth concentration actually a good thing? Does it make it harder for other people to climb the economic ladder?
That's a good question. Because if a small group controls most of the resources, it could potentially limit opportunities for everyone else.
Right. It's like they're playing a whole different game with different rules.
It's interesting because the article also brings up globalization again.
Oh, right. Because globalization can fuel wealth creation, but it can also lead to more inequality if it's not managed properly.
Yeah, so we're back to that two-sided coin again. More opportunities, but also potentially more disparity.
Exactly. So can our billionaire superheroes actually use their wealth to address these issues, or are they part of the problem?
It's like we have to figure out if they're using their powers for good or not.
Exactly. And to make things even more interesting, the article points out that most billionaires actually fall into a specific wealth range.
Oh, really? What's that?
Their net worth is usually between $1 billion and $25 billion.
So even within the billionaire club, there's a lot of variation.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Some are like, mega rich, while others are just, well, regular billionaires.
I guess that means their ability to make a difference can vary too, right? Like a billionaire with $2 billion has a lot less power to change things than someone with $200 billion.
Exactly. It's all relative. So maybe it's not about labeling all billionaires as good or bad, but looking at how they're actually using their wealth.
Like, are they being responsible with their money? Are they trying to make
Right.
a positive impact on the world?
Right. It's about focusing on their actions, their choices, and how they're affecting the world around them.
So it's less about judging their wealth and more about judging what they do with it. Are they fighting for, truth, justice, and all that good stuff?
Exactly. Are they our real-life superheroes, or are they more like those supervillains who just hoard their wealth and power?
Okay, I'm hooked.
Eh.
Let's dive into some specific examples and see how these billionaires measure up to this whole superhero idea. Wow, so we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
We have.
Really makes you think about billionaires in a whole new light,
It does, doesn't it?
I mean, on the one hand, it's pretty amazing to imagine having that kind of wealth and the potential to make a real difference.
Yeah, the possibilities are endless, really.
But then there's that whole issue of inequality, the huge gap between the super rich and everyone else.
And that's the tricky part, right? It's a complex issue with no easy answers.
Definitely. And I appreciate that the article doesn't try to tell us what to think.
Right. It's not about judging billionaires as good or bad.
It's more about giving us the information and letting us form our own opinions.
Exactly. It's like, here's the data, here are some perspectives, now you decide.
Exactly. It's about having an informed discussion.
So let's do a quick recap for our listeners just to bring it all together.
Sounds good. What are some of the key takeaways?
Well, first off, we saw that the number of billionaires is exploding.
Yeah, and we talked about how globalization is a big factor in that.
Right. More interconnectedness, more opportunities to create wealth, but also potentially more inequality.
And then there's that surprising fact about real estate being a bigger billionaire maker than technology.
Who knew? Right.
And of course, we can't forget about the gender gap among billionaires.
It's still significant, but we're seeing some positive signs with women like Rihanna and Kylie Jenner breaking through.
So there's hope for more balance in the future.
Definitely. But I think the biggest takeaway is that just having a ton of money doesn't automatically make you a superhero.
Right, it's about how you use that wealth.
Are you using it to address global challenges, to make the world a better place? Or are you just hoarding it all for yourself?
It's about responsibility, right? Using your power for good.
Exactly. And this deep dive wasn't about giving you all the answers. It was about making you think, making you question.
It was about sparking a conversation, right?
Exactly. Because these are important issues that affect all of us.
So here's a final thought for our listeners to ponder. Imagine for a moment that you were a billionaire.
Ooh, I like this.
What cause would you champion? How would you use your wealth to make a real difference in the world?
That's a great question to leave everyone with.
It's something to really think about.
Yeah.
And until next time, keep diving deep.